My name is Sebastian Aguirre, and I'm a human rights activist and theatre practitioner from the Chilean refugee diaspora living in the UK. I run the Actors for Human Rights AFHR project, an outreach programme that uses documentary and verbatim theatre to engage a variety of audiences across the UK on human rights issues. Here I'm sharing a game with the artists and researchers on the Finding Home project that I often use to accompany my work to help audiences understand the complexity of the asylum-seeking process and how refugees gain legal status in the UK's hostile environment. The initial interview is the first thing that will happen after you've made an asylum claim. It's not usually for at least 2 weeks after you've claimed asylum, and you have to show up for your initial interview wherever you are in the country. You have to show up at Luna House in Croydon, and there is no support for you until you have made that claim. So I know people that have basically made their way, have been given a date, made their way to Croydon and slept at the local train station. Once you've had your initial screening interview, and that's basically fingerprints, photos, and a kind of top line of why what your asylum claim is based on. If you require housing support, you will be relocated or dispersed, as some people call it.
That's before this.
Well, this is all stuff that might happen at the same time.
Yeah.
So you'll start to have, once you've had your screening interview and you're in the asylum system, you'll receive £37.75 a week. That's to support yourself in all areas other than housing. So that's food, that's communications, that's clothing, that's transport. That's everything, £37.50 a week, £37.75 a week. And it's often given to you through a credit system. So there is a card that monitors what you spend that money on. So there was an instance where somebody wanted to buy their kids some trainers, and rather than spending the money on food, they waited and they used food banks, and they bought trainers for 2 of their children, and the Home Office saw that they'd spent it on something that wasn't relevant and weren't spending it on food and cancelled it. The other thing here is the signing in and reporting. You have to sign in most cases it's weekly, if you can evidence and can get certified medical reports of the stress that going and signing in might affect you. You can change that, but the majority of people have to sign in every week, like you would do if you were on job seekers allowance or anything like that. Now these sign-in reporting stations are run by the people that are running the immigration detention centres. They're run by private security companies, and this is predominantly where people will be taken to immigration detention centres. So the people that are profiting from running immigration detention centres are making the decision about who is being detained in them. And the decision isn't made by somebody who studied the law, it isn't made by somebody who is a judiciary figure. The decision is made by somebody employed by this private security company, and all they need to do is tick a box that says, we think you might be working illegally, we think you might disappear, you don't have enough community in the area. You've been relocated and dispersed to Portsmouth. You've been, I know somebody that had been signing in for 3 years in Portsmouth, and they had a tick box saying, you do not have enough community for us to believe that you will stay in one place. And they were detained. I also know of an LGBTQI plus couple from Uganda, a lesbian couple. They told the Home Office that they were a couple, they'd been together for years, and the Home Office said, well, we have no civil evidence that you're a couple. So they relocated them to different cities. So if you're trying to, if the grounds of your asylum claim are that you're, gay and you have a partner, it becomes a lot harder to evidence if the Home Office have moved you to 2 completely different cities. Fortunately, it was Manchester and Liverpool, and they managed to work that out. What happens very, very often is that people lose their solicitors that they fought very hard to get through legal aid, Yeah. In order to get legal aid, you need to provide bank statements showing that you don't have any money. So if you've arrived with savings, that can be really tricky. There's no time frame. I know people that have waited years. One person that I know that fortunately was recently granted, but they waited, I think, something like 2 years for their substantive interview. So you have your substantive interview. Your substantive interview normally lasts somewhere between 2 and 6 hours. And anecdotally speaking, again, people have talked about being asked the same 10 questions in different ways, over and over and over again. So, yeah, we've had cases where people's asylum claims have been refused because they've said arrest warrant at one point and they've said search warrant at another point about the same incident, or they haven't been clear, the dates, whether it was a Tuesday or a Wednesday. There's a lot of stress that goes on around the substantive interview because you just don't want to get things wrong. That can be compounded as well if you are fleeing from countries where you are persecuted by the state, going to and talking to the state about things that have happened to you, particularly if you've experienced torture or any kind of trauma, can be an incredibly re-traumatizing experience, right? So it used to be that the people that were doing these interviews would be in like full sort of uniform. You will get a Home Office decision. So again, this decision is not made by anybody who has studied the law. This is not made by a judiciary figure. This is made by somebody that will have had about 2-3 weeks training and will be your caseworker and will be working towards a refusal rate target. When I say it's a corrupt system, I mean it is corrupt in a political sense, but I actually mean it's logically and mathematically a corrupt system to assess a person's needs against a refusal rate target. They posited their refusal rate across the board at 67%. They will refuse 67% of all asylum claims. Within that, they also posited the figure a little bit higher for LGBTQI plus claims at 76%. So they said we refuse approximately 76% of asylum claims. There was an independent report done by the UK LGIG, the UK Lesbian and Gay Migration Group, and Stonewall that posited that figure at closer to 99% of asylum claims. If we make an assumption that the Home Office are going to refuse your asylum claim, the next thing you can do is appeal. So yeah, your appeal will go to a lower tribunal judge, and this is the first time your claim will be reviewed or a decision will be made about your claim by somebody who's studied the law. The judge can overturn that decision. So if the judge has granted you asylum and said, yes, this is a refugee, this person needs protection under international human rights law and under the UN Refugee Charter, the Home Office can still challenge it, and they often do. So at that point, what you would need to do...
You need to gather new evidence because...
You'd need to gather new evidence for your... You can make a fresh claim submission. In order to make a fresh claim submission, you need to have substantive new evidence for your claim.
From that date forward.
This is another point where you will lose your legal aid, you will lose any kind of legal support that you have for your claim. You might also have to go through the process of finding a new lawyer. You have to make a fresh claim submission. You have to say to the Home Office, I am going to, within 2 weeks. You have 2 weeks to make that claim. So where the Home Office don't really have a time frame for the decisions that they make or the life that you have, the onus is constantly on you to do things within a certain time frame.
And in a kind of good outcome, if they are granted refugee status, do they get any support from the state to kind of get on their feet, or?
2 weeks! Again, you have 2 weeks. You have 2 weeks to find yourself somewhere to live, to find a job. Personally, I know somebody that was in the system for 13 years. And I know of somebody that was in the system for like 20 odd years.
How?
And so how ready are you to either get housing support or to be a renter? How ready are you to be, employable?
Yeah.
What's your CV going to look like? You fled your country and you were a doctor or an engineer.
Yeah.
How qualified do you feel having been kind of living in this system where you're not allowed to work?
Yeah.
How qualified do you even feel to go and get a job? Once you've been granted refugee status, yes, it feels like a relief momentarily, but then
You are left without
It's a
any
panic.
support
You've been
system, yeah.
conditioned into being sort of like kind of dependent on the state.
Yeah.
I think we need a complete overhaul of the asylum process. This is a process to recognise people's rights as refugees, and it can't take as long as it does. I think we need to end the restriction on people being allowed to work. I think immigration detention centres need to be shut down, and I think we need to put an end to these mindless, cruel deportations.